without further ado, I'm going to introduce these two amazing humans. Eugene Robinson is an author, journalist, actor, and vocalist who is, who has fronted the avant-garde rock band Oxbow since its inception in 1988, along with fronting the Italian supergroup Buñuel. He's the author of multiple books, including Fight, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Ass Kicking, but were afraid you'd get your ass kicked for asking, which is the greatest subtitle of a book I've ever heard in my life. He's interviewed Chris Rock, Charles Manson, Samuel Jackson, Billy Bob Thornton, Halle Berry, and has seen his work appear in GQ, The New York Times, Hustler, Decibel, and more, with his more contemporary work appearing weekly on Look What You Made Me Do, his Substack, as well as the Eugene S. Robinson Show Stomper podcast. And last but certainly not least, Jim Ruland, the man of the evening, is the co-author, give it up, of Do What You Want with Bad Religion and My Damage with Keith Morris, who, as I'm sure many of you know, is the founding vocalist of Black Flag, The Circle Jerks, and Off. Ruland has been writing for punk zines such as Flipside, Razor Cake for more than 25 years, and his work has received awards from Reader's Digest and the National Endowment for the Arts. We are here tonight to celebrate his most recent book, Corporate Rock Sucks, The Rise and Fall of SST Records. Please join me in welcoming Jim Ruland and Eugene Robinson.
Yeah. Really appreciate that. I learned today that Max and I went to the same school, Northern Arizona University in Flagstaff, Arizona. There's going to be a quiz. You guys are kind of slow.
Let's see, I thought you forgot.
No. I remember. But the mascot of our school is called the Lumberjacks, and Max kind of has taken that to heart. He looks just like our mascot. So I should have brought the flannel and the beanie and an axe. Or an axe to grind. I am like so excited. I'm going to stand up. I'm really excited to be here tonight. As Max mentioned, the last book that I was a collaboration I did with Bad Religion, and it came out in August of 2020. And we know what happened in 2020, which was a lot of awful shit. So there was a tour planned and all kinds of events that we had planned, and we weren't able to do any of them. And I was really looking forward to it because for a period in 2018, I actually followed the band around. I mean, I say it that way because it's a mistake to say that I was on tour with Bad Religion, although I did get to ride on the tour bus for a couple stops in Germany and Italy. And what I didn't know then was that the singer of Bad Religion, Greg Graffin, does not travel with the band, right? So when we get into these stops in these little towns, Jay Bentley would get off the bus, Brian Baker, legendary guitar player, get off the bus, and then I would get off the bus, and people would think I was Greg Graffin. And I was a little mortified by this because I mean, I thought like what Greg Graffin doesn't have tattoos, but we are about the same height, same build, same brain. We're both like really, really, really smart. No, he's got a PhD, but we both wear glasses. So I can kind of, I don't know. It was kind of baffling to me, but the band loved it. And in fact, when we were out at restaurants, they would make me get up and take pictures with them. And it was kind of fun. And
also, why does he not travel with the band? As a singer, I want to know.
Because he has to, do his own thing. Well, one of the main reasons is on a tour bus is that there's endless opportunities to bullshit and talk, and so he saves his voice by riding alone, listening to podcasts, listening to music, having the wind blow through it. But anyway, I was really missed that camaraderie. Reminded me of like, being on the tour bus was a little bit like being in the Navy, or like a very masculine thing where a lot of the disgusting and hilarious stuff happens with the crew. And I was really looking forward to that. And I was looking forward to telling that story. And I've been waiting 4 years to tell this story. So thank you for being here. So I could tell that story and I can finally move on with my life. I spent the pandemic researching SST records. I listened to a lot of old records. I read a lot of old zines, and I talked to a lot of old punk rockers who were sitting around at home with nothing better to do. So I had written a book with Keith Morris, as Max mentioned, who was the first singer for Black Flag. And when I started this project, he gave me a list of emails and phone numbers to reach out to. I had like, a pretty solid foundation, to, start out from. And I made all these emails, I called all these people, and people just weren't getting back to me. And meanwhile, I'm like writing like a 6-part introduction, just kind of ready to get started and trying to find my voice and starting to freak out like, I'm not going to have a book if no one ever returns my calls. And then finally, I was able to talk to Mugger, who is one of the heroes of SST records. Mugger was like, to say he was a roadie is the kind of like, he'd be fine with that, but he really did everything. And over the course of the history of SST, became one of the owners and ran all the accounting. And when after he got his degree and left and made an enormous success of himself, is kind of, I don't want to say the reason SST made the turn that it did, but it definitely happened around the same time that he left. So I was talking to Mugger, he gave me all these great stories, which are in the book. And I was like, at the end, I was like, Mugger, you got to help me out. People aren't calling me back. What do I do? And he's like, dude, go on Facebook. Like, what? It's like, yeah, they're all on Facebook. I mean, trust me, just go. And I had very, self-righteously, maybe sanctimoniously deleted my Facebook account a number of years ago. And I'm like, oh shit, I gotta start up a Facebook account all over again. And sure enough, they were all there. All the old punks are on Facebook. That's where they live. So if you ever want to find an old punk, start with Facebook. So I could ramble on like this for a while. I don't think I'm going to read from the book unless anyone really, really wants me to, because we're here with Eugene Robinson, and I'm excited to talk to him about his experience with SST and take it from there. What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay, one thing else is that I want to remind you, this is mainly for the cameras because it's not like more people have arrived, but I'm giving away a record at the end of this night. It's a trivia question, so pay attention. Question could come at any time. Hi, Eugene.
Hey, Jim.
So were you surprised when I reached out to you and said, hey, I want to talk to you about SST?
No. I mean, I guess what was surprising was that you were the first one to actually want to do that. I mean, I think, and you pegged this in some interview that you did later, that it was strange for us to be on SST at the time. And there was members of Oxbow were like, I don't think, they're going in. But I was insistent because for me, I had a relationship with Chuck and I really wanted to have done that. So,
well, let's back up and talk about some of your first experiences with different personalities and Black Flag and SST, going all the way back to like Keith, right? Was he the first?
Keith was the first, and it happened not too many miles from here, down at the end of Cesar Chavez. There was a show at the farm, and it was the Circle Jerks, and it was Effigies, and I don't remember who else. And and that kind of magical thinking, we were at the show, and I said, we're all here. My whole band is here. We should be playing this show. And we said, let's go talk to them. And I hadn't really counted on the visual impact that having a guitar player who's 6'6" and 275 pounds has. It's like, what is that guy told me once? it's funny when you take out a gun, people just give you things. I was like, and it was the same sort of deal. So we said, hey, we're all here. We want to play. And they're like, well, okay, if it's okay with the band. So we go to Keith. We go, Keith, we want to play. And it was just 3 songs before you guys start. Is that cool? He was like, go ahead. And he says, but you can't use our stuff. So the guys in the effigies, you know, they're from Chicago. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't want to get hurt. So they said, yeah, okay, go ahead. And so they said, next up from LA, the Circle Jerks. And so we come out and people clearly knew we were not the Circle Jerks. But it was a great, and this has framed my entire existence to a certain degree because there was a fusillade of garbage and spit. And I couldn't have been happier. I was like, hey, yeah, fuck it. As much as you hate me, I hate you even more. And it ended up being a love fest. And we played our 3 songs and we got off. And that's when I met Klaus that night and Darren Peligro, who were there, who came up. And then they ended up putting us on, you know, Not So Quiet on the Western Front and producing some records. And that was my start with Keith.
This is your band, Whipping Boy.
This
right?
is Whipping Boy. Yeah, so.
And if you don't know, Keith is, I mean, his dreads are almost as big as he is now. He's everybody is taller than Keith, except for maybe Greg Hudson. But I think everybody in punk rock is he's used to looking up to people and being like, all right, this is happening. So where to go from there in terms of
I think, and then after that, I'd seen Black Flag play at not Club 56 in New York when I was still in New York. And there was a big article and they all had the Soho Weekly News and they all had, or Dukowski had on a hat, a baseball hat, a trucker hat that said redneck on it. And the big record that they had, you know, we're talking about their white minority thing. I go, yeah, I gotta go. And so I saw Des singing. And then a friend of mine who was good friends with Rollins said, when they came out west, said, my friend sings for Black Flag now. And I go, Des? And she said, no, it's a guy named Henry. Said, no, I don't know him. So at that show at the MAB, I showed up and did an interview with them for my magazine, The Birth of Tragedy. So I talked to everybody. But of course, I'm just a jerk off at the show. They didn't actually believe I was really going to publish the magazine. So they were assholes to me. But I printed exactly as it happened. And that's when Chuck was like, good interview. And that's when I started to have a relationship with Chuck. So that was 80, 82, 83.
okay, because yeah, that's really interesting because Chuck has a very feisty, mischievous, contentious, all the above relationship with the media or anyone that falls under the rubric of media.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
And there was a famous, well, not famous, but it was an interview I found that's in the book with Al Flipside, and he was, you know, trying to get Chuck to describe SWA.
Yep.
Because it had this, you know, people didn't even know how to pronounce it. You know, in the age of hardcore, everybody thought, is it SWA?
Yeah.
Is it SWA? What is SWA? Is it SWA like swastika? And then people were like a little concerned, right? And Chuck would be very elusive. And if you've seen Decline of Western Civilization, where he's kind of like this mohawk with a 40-ounce bottle of beer, kind of channeling the Buddha or something, you know, talking about the cosmic unconsciousness. You kind of feel like he's sincere in some aspects, and it's all a giant leg pull in another. And so
he was talking about experimenting on mice and rats in the Decline. He ended up being like my favorite Beatle. Chuck was always, I always vibed with Chuck.
Yeah, he had a lot of fun with the media. And with that interview with Al Flipside, he was talking about like, well, I feel like you can't, it's music and you can't really put it into words. You put it in the words. So now it's like Barton Fink, the wrong words, it moves, it's in direction. And Al, who had already interviewed Black Flag a number of times, you know, was like, knew he was knee deep in the bullshit. He said, well, unfortunately, we're a print publication.
Well, you know, I did that group Blackface with Chuck. And at one point, he had kind of did that persona thing. We're rehearsing, you know, but then he got a little feisty. And I had to, Chuck, you okay? Like, were you having some kind of, and it turns out that he had gotten in some edibles, and they're fucking strong, right? He was thinking like, oh, I'm just gonna have a cookie. So he was out of his mind. Yeah, it was
I
great.
think we've all been there. Right? We've been like, uh-oh, yeah, I'm in for a long night. Well, talk about blackface, because I didn't really ask you about it. I don't know a whole lot about it because it happened after, Chuck was kind of still lingering around SST, but he had divested himself of his ownership, so he no longer had a real say in the business at that time.
It happened right after the lawsuit with him suing Greg, when that concluded.
Okay, so
And
long after that.
long after that. And he I did a spoken word thing in LA, and he played bass behind it. And we were saying that was fun. Can we do something like that? Can we do it again or in some way? And he was like, yeah, well, let's do this thing. I have a bunch of songs I wrote for Black Flag that I never recorded with Black Flag because, the whole thing with Greg. And I was like, well, let's do those, as well as whatever songs for Black Flag. He was cool, we'll do it. What do we call it? And he said, well, we could call it, we could use a logo and stuff for Black Flag, but Blackface. And I go, that's a great fucking name. You can only actually do it with me as a singer. Anyway, it's going to be a problem, right? And so we decided to do it, and they came up. He got his stepson Milo to play guitar, who's a phenomenal, like you hear Jimi Hendrix and Stevie Ray Vaughan. You go, oh yeah, he's channeling him. He's like a Ginn interpreter, but Ginn would play these long, complicated runs, and then he would just kind of fall off the cliff, whereas Milo could actually conclude the run, and it was working really well. But then Chuck started to get, he was like Ian, Ian Mackay.
Oh no.
Yeah, it was Ian who just took a shot at me in that Detroit the Hardcore movie, and he was like, yeah, man, Eugene came through and he like extorted $100 out of me, and I was kind of fucked. And I was watching the movie, I'm laughing because of course I did extort the money, but there were reasons for it. So, but Ian gets on the phone with Chuck and says, I don't know about the name, and Chuck doesn't defend the name. He backs down. And I said, what would Ian say we should call it? And he said, we should call it Black Velvet. I go, that sucks so bad. If Ian's not in the group, I don't think we need to have this discussion. So, but that was the beginning of the end, actually. So,
yeah.
We managed to do that 1 7-inch, and there were 4 songs in total, and then the other 2.
That they kind of there's definitely some groupthink that gets involved when certain people.
Well, those guys had that whole thing. There was a whole language, there was a whole SST vibe that you couldn't. You could feel it, and it translated well. It traveled well. You could always see people who had fallen under the penumbra of that kind of SST thing, but yeah.
Well, part of it is definitely that whole what happens when a group of people spend way too much time together in a pretty confined space,
yeah.
But also that whole South Bay vibe. You've spent a little bit of time down there, right? It's I actually lived in, and this is what gave me the courage to take this book on, because around 2000 I moved to Manhattan Beach, which is about a mile north of Hermosa Beach. And the first thing I did was I bought a skateboard and I rode on the Strand, just like Keith sings about. But it's really close. And of the beach cities, Hermosa is the smallest, and it's just different.
It's a different place
down there. And now it was quasi bohemian it was bohemian in the 50s and 60s, and that kind of lasted for a while. Now it's like hopelessly gentrified.
Yeah.
But the people who were from there, like I can go to punk rock shows and I can kind of pick out the people who are from the South Bay.
Yeah.
It's really, really kind of fascinating to me, the way that it's different.
It's funny, I've gotten obsessed with MMA, and the classic in the early days, a classic Huntington Beach fighter, but was like, could have come from the same, was Tito Ortiz before he became a friend of Donald Trump's. He was just like the classic. I mean, breaking into people's cars, stealing their checks. And, that was it was just a beach community weirdness, man. Never wore shoes, that kind of thing. So,
yeah, I remember being at a punk rock bar and somewhere in Orange County and was talking to a really pretty girl, and someone said, "Hey, that's Tito Ortiz's sister." I was like, I gotta go, like out of the county immediately.
Well, Evan Smith from Rolling Stone, he did a piece with Tito, and he said, he's been nothing but nice to me, but he reminds me of all the guys I hated in high school. And I was like, yeah, welcome to Huntington Beach.
And that was, maybe from having, spent a little time in Hermosa Beach. I mean, and well, my sister was a bartender down there for a while. So, I mean, it's a great town to have a sister as a bartender and to have a drinking problem, as I did for a number of years. So I did spend some time down there, but it always shocked me that how, when I would, I was already writing for zines and really interested in punk rock, didn't know a whole lot about SST, but like, it really is in the water there. I mean, the church is there, media art is there, so much, there's this like legacy and lore that's different I don't know any other place in LA that's quite like that has this like, this is where the scene kind of coalesced and came together, except maybe the mask.
But it was total too, if you remember, because nobody dressed like them even in those days. And I remember seeing Chuck at the Door Festival in Belgium, and I was like, fuck, bro. I knew it was you from like 200 yards off, because nobody looks like this, and I would always go to the show, like any show I was at. And the first thing before I realized it was Chuck, I was like, who is that creep? And I go, oh shit, it's you, Chuck. I mean, I can't even, it was a level of fashion genius that I haven't come close to being able to approach. And he's still rocking it. I think what he was wearing at Door was like a short pants suit that was lime green with burnt orange accents on a fishing hat. Oh it was like, nobody dresses like this. Nobody.
What's kind of interesting is that, and I think this is true of a lot of the big cities in California, is that people who aren't from LA, San Francisco, San Diego, but especially when they're thinking about Southern California, if they're from New York or if they're from there's a lot of, I don't know why, but there have been a lot of books written by people from England. There's this confusion about as if Huntington Beach and Hermosa Beach are the same thing, and they could not be more different. I mean, they're 30 something miles apart, two completely different cultures.
And a mile apart from Hollywood and Orange County too. Yeah, I found that as a New Yorker, I found that they didn't seem to, I mean, the first time I went to Huntington Beach, we said, oh, we're lost, we're trying to get to a show. Let's ask those guys for directions. They look like punk rockers. We turned and looked, and they rolled the window down, and then they leaned out with hammers and tried to smash our windows out. It was just
that was kind of the part of the genius of Greg Ginn and SST is that we had this. He was frustrated, right? He was frustrated with Hollywood because it couldn't get in, couldn't play shows, couldn't do gigs. And so we created a scene in the South Bay. And when he looked outside of it, he looked to Huntington Beach, he looked to Orange County, he looked to, not Hollywood.
Yeah. Which worked. I mean, there were those extensive, postering things where they would just go nuts, that worked.
So let's talk about your zine a little bit. How long did that last?
Well, technically, it's still going. It's the Birth of Tragedy magazine. That's where, I started with the Black Flag interview, then the Manson interview, and then Ginsberg from Getty, and Chuck actually ended up advertising in it, which was cool. Actually gave me real money. See, my relationship when you called, I'm sure, I don't know what everybody else is telling you, but those guys always paid. They paid for the ads that they took out in the magazine, and they liked the magazine and the vibe and so on. And each issue was a different theme. There was fear, and there was power, and there was God, and there was love. And so they, sex and depression. We had a whole bunch of themed issues. And so Chuck was all in. And at one point, we were about to do a record called Serenade in Red. We got Richard Kern to take the cover art, and nobody was releasing our records in the state. And Chuck expressed an interest. And Nico was like, our guitar player, they didn't want to do it. He's like, we can find, but they were really showed up at the show in force. We saw the guys from Saccharin Trust, hadn't seen them in years, Earl and Chuck, and it was with Steve Shelley from Sonic Youth, his side project band. And he's like, we don't care about those guys. We came to see you. And they were so passionate about it. We're like, okay, let's put the record out. And it had already been released in Germany like 6 months earlier. So yeah, it was the magazine, the interviews, the vibe, the band, the record, and they were, the only weird thing about it was the record was produced by Steve Albini, which again, routinely, consistently mispronounced his last name.
Greg did.
Yeah, which I finally figured out, oh shit, Greg hates him, So I go to Albini, I go, hey, why does Greg hate you? Yeah, you mean that guy who can't play guitar? That guy? I was like, I don't want to get into this. But
I heard the worst one, Stevie Albini.
Yeah, Albini. He called him Albini. No, he can't. I said he would say Albini has produced your record, huh? And I go, yeah, Albini. He goes, yeah. So Albini. Okay, all right, yeah, Albini. So
yeah. So now we're talking about Oxbow.
Yeah.
And so around what year is this?
95.
Okay. And so by this time, SST is not releasing a ton of original material. And a lot of the stuff that they have put out have been like best of albums, anthology albums.
Well, the biggest issue is the rumors were already afloat. The guy used to be friends with the guys in Bad Brains, and they were like, we haven't gotten paid. And Husker Du cats were like, we got paid. And there was, people knew, distributors were like, yeah, we're paying them, but they're not. And so there was already a problem. But
there had been a problem almost 10 years before, but like it was a big problem now. This is well after the whole Negative Land.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So there was an expectation, but my ex-wife at the time was an attorney. So we said, look, we're gonna have to have a contract. We had the contract, and they paid us upfront for it. And I at that point I knew I was lucky to get that and didn't expect any money or accounting post sales, which indeed I was wrong. We actually got reasonable accounting after that, and there were subsequent checks, and they played by the books with us. It was 100% cool, and I don't have any negative cash stories. I think I told you on the phone, I don't have any negative cash stories to tell about those guys. They paid for their ads, they paid for the record, and it was fine. Yeah.
That's probably one of the most maddening things for people who did not get paid or have either some level of animosity or just confusion about why they don't have a relationship with the label anymore, is because some people absolutely were taken care of. And some of the people like that I talked to, like Soundgarden and Screaming Trees, were that like when they had management is when they were getting paid, because there were people on top of it. We had one weird moment, and the moment was over film and TV rights. And he really wanted to own the ability to upsell our stuff to TV and movie people, and we wouldn't. And it was the only glimmer of anger I ever got from him. Well, if you want to go do it, yeah, it seems like it would make. He was trying to lead us to believe that he would actively be engaged in selling it into TV and film, which we probably weren't going to do. And he was right about that. But at the same time, taking the short end money for that didn't make any sense. I had a friend at that point who had already sold 19 seconds of a song to a film company, and they gave him 20 grand for it. So I'm wow. It's lightning in a bottle, fine, but I'm not going to sell it. But it was a brief flash. It was like maybe 5 minutes of anger, and then it was
back to being Greg again.
Yeah, I mean, when that happens, when the studios come calling or people want to use it as a show, it can be extremely lucrative, and you don't want to give that away for nothing.
Yeah, and it showed that he was paying attention because he knew that. I mean, I wasn't sure. I hadn't known too much about film and TV rights at that point. I was like, hey, they're going to use it in the movie, cool. But, so.
And that was the other thing, is that people, some bands requested changes to the contract, and they were made.
Yep. We did as well.
Yeah, they were like, okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Or it was a brief discussion. It wasn't like, whatever the situation is, it's not like SST set out to amass this, empire music that they would own and control and screw everybody over. That I don't think that was the intent at all. That they were very amenable.
Like Sonic Youth.
What's that?
Sonic Youth and SST.
That what? Well, we'll do questions at the
Well,
end.
that the whole like kind of like Sonic Youth like to SST before.
Yeah, but we'll do questions at the end. So
Well, I mean, like.
yeah, I like Sonic Youth too. So now, when the Serenade Red was a reissue, and you got the rights back after a certain amount.
Well, and that was one of the things we changed in the contract. They had wanted like 20 years or something, right? So no. I think we cut it down to 7. That seemed to make, I mean, if you haven't sold it in 7 years, there's no need for you to keep selling it. And so the rights have returned to us. So again, we didn't have a problem with it.
Yeah, a lot of people did have an issue with like, the perpetuity of meaning forever.
Yeah. And I mean, I remember laughing with Chuck about it. There was one line in the contract about musical formats of the future. And at the time, right, there was no streaming. I was like, what is the musical? He goes, hey, things change. And of course, they put that record out on CD. It would have been released in Germany in vinyl. So things had already changed. Vinyl was dying at that time. So
right. Yeah. And one of the things that that came out during the whole Negative Land lawsuit is that, and if you don't, I'm saying it like everybody understands, but with Negative Land, they very publicly sued, SST sued Negative Land, and Negative Land countersued SST. And Negative Land, being Negative Land, published everything, all the memos, and they published it in a way that was like really interesting and made SST not put them in a not very good light. But it was also fascinating to read the back and forth, and also the ongoing project that Negative Land had trying to get the rights to their music back, from all these legal entities that had pounced on it. But during all of that, it came out that SST had been paying out a royalty, assigning a royalty rate for vinyl for CDs, which was at the time much lower. Now it would be the other way around.
Which I think also happened here in San Francisco with Alternative Tentacles and Biafra and the Dead Kennedys. I think they hadn't made that transition. So I could be wrong, but that's what I'm remembering having happened. So.
Yeah, it's there was a lot of, I mean, it's a challenging thing to run a business.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the issue, right? Was this malice or was it just sloppiness, And I think based on, historically speaking, it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, did you get that from talking to folks? Because Chuck is livid now. You can't really talk to him about Greg for more than 5 minutes without him just, the eyebrows go up and he's gone. Right?
Yeah, there are a lot of people who that wouldn't talk to me because of legal reasons. Either they have ongoing legal matters or they've settled, and part of the settlement is not to talk about it. But when I talked to Bill Stevenson, he was like, he was just clear he just wanted to talk about music and not and his bandmates and the positive stuff. He says he doesn't even like to say his name out loud. Yeah. And so I had an enormous amount of respect for Bill for being able to to do that, which I think you have to do. But there's a lot of attention on the bands that we got to know listening to college radio, or while we were younger and collecting records. But there are many more bands that SST put out that did not rise to that level. And a lot of the people I talk to from bands like that are mostly just sad that they've lost a relationship with someone that they had such respect and admiration for, and who literally changed their lives. Like, for a while, SST was the coolest label on the planet. And when we got that phone call from Greg, was still, when I talked to Mark Lanigan, he said, to this day, that's still the highlight of my music career, was when Greg called me and said, we want to put out our records.
Well, what's funny, and you don't know this yet because we haven't talked about it, but 2 days ago, I got a call from some filmmakers in LA who are making a documentary about the Butthole Surfers. And there's always that weird point where I could feel him kind of dancing around, where he was like, well, what about the touch and go thing? Like, there's always a point where, like, these guys who are like nice, kind of cool hero guys, suddenly, there's that moment between Corey and Gibby where the whole label, and what you start to see emerging, it's like, I think, based on what you've said and based on my reading of your book, that there were two SST worlds. And if you were paying attention and you were on top of it, you didn't get fucked, but if you were like with any record label, if they could snip out, and snip out makes it seem like it was malice. If you weren't on top of it, you're probably gonna get fucked. Right. So
yeah, and I think sometimes you would anyway, because I can't imagine there were bands that were any less on top of it than Sonic Youth, for example, because they were extremely ambitious, and they were not neophytes. They put out records before they came to SST. They had toured Europe 3 or 4 times. They were experienced musicians and savvier in all the ways that you can lose money and get screwed on the road. How are we doing on time?
7:49. If you guys want to transition into
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, how does that sound?
I'm your deal. Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Now the guy who had the question is gone. Yeah, he's fled. Maybe that's why he was so insistent. He had an important date.
Answer his question.
Oh yeah.
What about Sonic Youth?
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, that's a perfect segue because you were just talking.
Yeah. Well, Sonic Youth, they removed themselves from the label, and they went to Enigma. And the thing is that they had recorded Daydream Nation, which I think of as maybe one of the best indie records of the 1980s. And they were ready to put it out on SST. SST was getting bigger and bigger, but like, that was the period where they started putting out a ton of stuff. In 1987, Ray Farrell, who worked at SST, told me that SST put out more records than Warner Brothers, and people at Warner Brothers told him that was a ridiculous number of records. And I was talking to some, it's funny, around this time, SST in the mid 80s had signed not 1, but 2 jam bands from Richmond, Virginia, which kind of was a head scratcher for a lot of people. Always August and Alternatives, and they were like, it was fat. I mean, they're great. They're very talented musicians, very good bands, and also lifers in the music scene. But they came from the same scene, in a small town in a state not known for its music. So it was kind of like a strange thing. So Jim Thompson of Alternatives told me that he had introduced himself to Thurston Moore at like a show and was like, yeah, we're on SST. And Thurston Moore was not happy. Like, he was like looking at like this hippie being like, what? I didn't listen to 10,000 hardcore records, so you could be on SST. I mean, he didn't say that. I'm just, doing a bit. But so yeah, you can understand, like, at the time you're finally on SST. Sonic Youth really wanted to be on SST. A lot of bands did, but I think they were, they really worked for it. And so for that to happen, they were a little crestfallen to see that they weren't getting the kind of push that like Husker Du had gotten just a year or two before. So they decided, no, we're not going to put Debut Nation on SST, which would have been huge, right? I mean, it wasn't Bleach or Nevermind, but it was a big record. It definitely would have made a difference. And then of course after Debut Nation, they went to Geffen and they brought Ray Farrell along with them, and with that came a whole host of connections from the SST world onto Geffen Records and Nirvana and the whole indie explosion of the early 90s that leads to this moment right now. See, I solved it. That's how you talk about Sonic Youth.
Kept them afloat while they released so much crap in the 80s, like Black Planet catalog, like used to do, but kept them, financially afloat while they put out Tom Cully's dog.
Yeah, there was a really fascinating.
Tweaker bees.
Yeah, well, I came later, but it was a really fascinating article in Rolling Stone where Greg was very forthcoming about who were the big sellers on SST.
Who?
And it was Bad Brains, Soundgarden, and although Soundgarden came a little bit later, but even Negative Land, Christianity is Stupid sold 35,000 copies, which is kind of amazing when you think about it. So it was really it really shows that the label was gaining steam and really doing something pretty incredible.
That's not so crazy. I mean, Bad Brains had that really weird moment where they were opening for Madonna. I always forget that, but I'm never sure whether that really happened or I hallucinated it, right? The Beastie Boys brought them along and they made it as far as Seattle, and then historically traditional fashion, things blew up. So.
Yeah.
I think it was a punch in the face involved somehow. I mean, it's not so much a punch in the face, it's why you punch the person in the face. And I think that's where they got in trouble. So.
Yeah, there were a lot of Bad Brain stories floating around, more than could ever be printed.
They've always been nice to me. But I could say that about Manson. He was always nice to me too. So.
Eugene, he's always nice to me. Does anyone have a non-Sonic Youth question?
I lived in Tucson in the early 80s, and I was really lucky because it's the I-10 corridor. So all those bands came through, and SST to us in Tucson, the Podunk was like the weird label, like not the punk label as much as the Minutemen and all the bands that we were like, oh man, these bands are crazy and they play great, and so for us there was this very abrupt turn, right? Like mid-80s, all of a sudden it was like having fun, going to the show, being about community, and then all of a sudden it was like slugfest, and everyone was just out to like beat everyone down. And when you started talking about this idea about SST, and there were other labels too on the West Coast and in Arizona as well, I feel like there was almost this shift at that same time from these labels taking advantage of the people, the same people who kind of built the community, and we're sort of more open to the idea of like giving more, getting back less, and then those people ended up kind of getting, but I don't know, because I was mostly in Tucson. I would come out to LA, go up to Huntington and stuff, and there'd be nothing. I mean, I would go to Fenders once in a while, whatever, but I never found the scene. You know what I mean? Like you'd skate around and stuff, but there wasn't anything really to see. So, but anyway, I wonder if you guys felt that was kind of similar in the SST evolution, where things kind of got more violent as the band sort of shifted.
I'll defer to the violence enthusiast. I mean,
well, but there's. Okay, so you were local, so you were in place, but there's a weird, I mean, this is in advance of the internet. It was a really kind of ballsy thing to jump in a van and to drive these. It wasn't a monoculture, there was no MTV. So there was weird, like really like we go, we went to play Saskatoon and everybody was, wow, a guy had just been murdered by the railroad tracks right behind the club. I go, "Lou, he got hit by a train?" No, he was beaten to death by rednecks who went and saw that movie in 1984 and wanted to go beat up some punkers. And so they found this kid walking by himself and fucking killed him. So, and if you remember, this was also the time when Black Flag had started to grow their hair, and they were getting, is right before the end, right before they broke up, and they had gone to England and toured with Venom. And then there was this whole skinhead weirdness because Henry initially had been a skinhead and thinking that there was some kind of alignment. And so there was a lot of fighting at shows. But I mean, you know, it happened to the hippies too, the age of Aquarius. It was a crock of shit. So yeah, things were it was no longer, you know, people picking you up from the floor if you fell. I remember people stabbing each other on the dance floor with church keys. I have a big memory of that. So all this peace and love, yeah. So, and LA was much stranger than San Francisco. I mean, we went to a show at the Olympic. Henry invited to, and my Whipping Boys drummer at the time, it was actually a black guy from Germany. So he didn't know shit about America. And he wandered off and he came back and he said, "Eugene, these guys just grabbed me and they called me a nigger. You know, what do I do?" I go, "I know what we do." That was great. That was great. Violence enthusiast. Yeah, that was a good night. So, but yeah, there was not. By 84, 85, things had gotten shitty. I mean, it was great for us because we just started doing different music and, you know, and
It's a different kind of energy, and I'm not saying it was all bad. It wasn't, but there was this definite shift in places like Tucson.
Yeah, but Arizona's fucking strange,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
I played there like 5 years ago the last time, and the guys who worked the club, I felt like they wanted to fight me. I'm just setting up to do sound check, man. You're like actually micing the drums. There's no need for hostility here. So it's a very strange Arizona. Sorry. Your home state. Yeah.
It's not my home state.
Okay.
I only went to school there for a couple of years. I mean, look what it did to fucking Max. He was a hairdresser when he started.
Actually, my hairdresser looks like Max.
Yeah, Arizona is a weird place. Well, I don't know if this is really addresses your question, but it's not going to stop me from going for it anyway. And that is that one of the biggest surprises to me is that SST is not a punk rock label.
Yeah.
I mean, it just isn't. And if you're looking for, you know, the hardcore punk, especially outside of Black Flag, it's very hard to find. There's the Stains album, which is an underappreciated masterpiece, and in my opinion, and Blast, which was by their own admission, kind of, you know, definitely
Black Flag interpreters.
Black was a very good way to put it. And
I mean, Cliff would I'm friends with Cliff. He would easily say that. So.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I like Blast. It doesn't come from.
I mean, who else plays a Dan Armstrong? It's not like you're gonna accidentally end up with a Dan Armstrong.
Whoops. Can you see through my guitar? Yeah. But yeah, so it was you know, and I think that was very much by design in terms of, you know, Greg Ginn didn't want to sign a bunch of cookie cutter bands, and it's like, I mean, it's very different from the mindset today, right? If you have something that's successful, you do it again and again and again, and you have 5 other people do it just the exact same way until it can't exist anymore. So he was really on to something there, and it was really kind of made me appreciate the label that much more, and the energy that he went into putting out all these records that he knew weren't going to sell. That wasn't the point.
They were kind of really ahead of the curve on a lot of stuff too. Like they got a lot of stuff that years later became really popular.
Right. I mean, that whole Saint Vitus, the side 2 of My War, Saint Vitus, you know.
Well, if you watch that Sam Dunn's thing, the Metal Evolution thing, right? And I was on some Let It Roll podcast, and we were talking about grunge, and they very specifically tie it all into Black Flag coming through Seattle and playing off of My War. And it was at that point, all the cats in Seattle, the guys in Soundgarden, they and our minds were blown, and it completely. So all that stuff that came after that, you could direct lineage to. Yeah.
Yeah, and they were there with the Meat Puppets, and everybody was there.
Yeah.
You know, from Mudhoney, the Nirvana guy,
Right.
like everybody was at the show.
Right. Right. Yeah.
That's
what.
Babbitt. I
Yep.
mean, they're all there.
What was it? Malfunction. The guy, the guys. Yeah. All of yeah.
So yeah, I definitely think they were ahead of the curve there. And if you look at like, you know, all the different or like versions of Black Flag instrumental, Black Flag spoken word, Black Flag, you know, whatever the last album is. You know?
It was weird when they played in Palo Alto. And it was their last show. The last show in Northern California at the very least. And I remember Henry was over at my place and he was like, I'm going to stay tonight. I was like, yeah, that's cool. And then he said, I actually can't stay tonight. Greg is being weird. And so we're going home tonight. And so they drove back that night. And then, I mean, this is the old days. I got a letter from him because there was no internet. And he was like, Greg broke up the band. And then I think he said something that, remember he said, which I thought was kind of strange considering it was his band. And I go, did he just kick you out? He was like, no, it's done. So I go, what are you gonna do? Then we do the course of letters. He goes, Henrietta Collins, what was that record? Henrietta Collins and something, the wife beaters, child beaters, something.
Yeah, you put the Ebola. Yeah,
he was really high on that. At that, he was like, "You got to listen to it," and I think he sent it to me. And yeah, I couldn't figure out what he was doing. I couldn't figure out what he was doing until he did the first Rollins band. Thinking like, okay, now I understand it. So
yeah,
I think he had to find his feet.
It's kind of funny in that as famous, much celebrity as Henry is, though you can find those records.
Yeah.
They were put out by Hotel Records.
Child beating wife haters or something. Was that it? Wife beating child haters.
Yeah. And the Children McNuggets, or is that a different?
That I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that was the first Rollins.
Let me just retract that from the internet.
Child McNuggets.
That didn't happen. I never said that. Eugene said it.
Yeah. Okay.
We have time for maybe like one more question and or also a secret prize.
Okay, we'll do it definitely. And yes.
So my question is, sorry, I was a little late, so I don't know if you already covered this, but is it true that SST was like one contract, one record
Yes.
for every band,
Yes.
even Sonic Youth?
And that's what made it appealing to so many artists like Soundgarden and also Nirvana. But we don't have enough time to get into that juicy story, but it's in the book. So do we want to give away a record?
Yeah.
I'm going to do that thing where I'm doing two things at once.
Talking and chewing gum.
I got to come up with a question, but first I got to show you what you can win. And like, not only
Oh, your mic fucked. Yeah. See, if you had a roadie, they would have like taped it.
never would have happened in an SST show. Okay, how many people are familiar with the band Run Westy Run? One person?
No,
Two people? Why are you so shy, guys?
Yeah.
This knowledge may not ever be useful ever again. So where are they from?
So
That's right, they're a Minnesota band, and they were brothers, and they were also extremely talented artists. And if you ever watch any of their videos, they do all their own artwork in the videos, including some of the animation. But I have here, this is going to blow your mind, a Run Westy Run test pressing that I'm going to give away. Not only, and usually a test pressing is like, oh, well, what's so great about a test pressing? There's There's no cover art. No inserts, but this one even has an insert. The original artwork with the lyrics for the obsessives in the room.
And I'm getting nostalgic just to see the Rainbow Records thing. That's great, man.
So I'm gonna read the what's it called? The epilogue. Thank you.
You're right, all right?
Yeah. It's just fill in the blanks. So I'm gonna read the epilogue because this is gonna help me. And when I read this, I'm more okay about letting go of these records. While art is not always trash, and this comes from M. Siegel of Paperback, which was a band that did entirely improvised music. While art is not always trash, it is always disposable. And while it may have relevance, it also just takes up space. People seem to get attached to things destined to pass: flowers, orgasm, friendship, life. The monuments that mark our graves will one day disappear. As much as we want to think so, art is not immortal. Only the fearless spirit it takes to invent an act of creation from nothing is ageless and knows no death. That's kind of heavy, huh? That's definitely a pandemic, kind of inspired epilogue. But yeah, all this story is just take what you want. So I collected all kinds of records during the pandemic. I would sift through Discogs, and I learned to look for the markers to see like which sellers were people that were getting press copies from SST, because sometimes you would have press releases, those weird catalogs that SST produced, photos, signed stuff, all kinds of stuff. And to me, that was sometimes even more valuable than the vinyl itself, getting all that information, being able to piece together what was SST doing in the spring of 1985, what was it trying, what was excited about, did it work out, that kind of thing. So, and Eugene, I'll need your help too, because I can't see or hear very well. I'll have to spot who does it. So don't be shy, just shout it out if you know it. But here's the question, are you ready for it? Ready? Yeah, okay. In the year 2000, the author, that'd be me, moved to what city?
New York.
You were close.
Manhattan.
Yes.
He cheated.
Well, New York is kind of.
This, and then someone else can have the record. I have a copy somewhere.
You have a test pressing?
I think so. I got a lot of
Oh
records.
my God. Really? Now I gotta come up with another question?
No, you give it to him and he can
Let
make
the
this up.
community
Oh,
figure it out.
yes. Okay. Only one thing is we have to take a picture of it together. So when I'm missing my Run Westy Run test pressing, I can look at our photo together and be like,
That's not a good idea. That's smart.
all right. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you.
Thank you, Max. And I'm gonna sign some books. Are you going anywhere?
No, I'm gonna hang around.
Okay, cool. So I want to chat a little bit afterwards. But I got off a plane today. I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, so I'm gonna put a mask on when we do the signing line stuff. But I'd be happy to sign your book and dedicate it to your friends, frenemies, parents, lumberjacks. That Sonic Youth guy. Max, you want to take it away?
Yeah. All right, let's hear it again for Eugene Robinson. So books are